you guys are going to be so blown away. You're going to be so blown away. You just trust me on this. Just wait. Meet Jessica Bryant. Jessica, what are you going to do today?
We are going to talk about what to me is the most important and foundational thing for every component of painting, something that a lot of us struggle with, even professionals. We have a concept, but being able to translate that to our work is just such a challenge.
Okay. Now, Jessica is someone who's really, really special. And it's really important that you get a chance to meet her today because she is considered one of the best artists in the world. Now, how do you get that distinction? You get invited into the Prix de West. That's like the show that if you get invited in there, like you are no slouch, right? She is in the Prix de West. And I'm going to show you her work in a minute, but let's get the show officially started.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhoads. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhoads.
Welcome to Art School Live. We're here every weekday and have been since COVID began, way back when. Seems like a long time ago. I'm Eric Rhoads. I'm art publisher in art magazines and events. And we're here every weekday at 12 noon. We have guest artists every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Mondays, we do art marketing Mondays. On Fridays, we do critiques, where we do feedback Fridays. And so welcome. We hope that you'll subscribe to the program, and we hope you'll hit the like button, tell other people about us, etc. It helps us. It helps you. We have taught literally millions of people how to paint, and we are so happy to have you here. We believe that anybody can learn to paint. I was at my doctor yesterday, my dermatologist. She had to burn off some skin cancers, and I said, do you paint? She says, no, I want to, but I don't have it in me. I said, you can do this. And she says, no, I don't think. I said, listen, I've taught 13 million people how to paint. You can do this. And she said, no, I think I'll be the one. And I said, no, you can do it. And we believe anybody can do it. So anyway, let me show you Jessica's work because it's going to blow you away. Look at that. I mean, that is so spectacular. And that's a watercolor. That is amazing, amazing work. Wow. So we're going to learn a little bit about what her secret sauce is today and what's magical. Jessica, are you there? Are you ready?
I am here and I'm all set to go.
Yeah. I'm thinking we met somewhere. Did we not meet somewhere?
Yeah. We were at PACE this year. I was there representing Plein Coeur d'Alene, an event I created.
Oh, that's right. I remember that now. Yes. And I remember seeing your work and being blown away by it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, tell us what you got here. What's going on?
So we are focused on value. And I know everybody's heard this, value does the work and color gets the credit. And a lot of us understand, a lot of us think we understand what we're doing, but sometimes, often, the translation just doesn't come through. And the longer I paint and the more I teach, the more I see these same patterns. So I just really wanted to touch on that today. I think that's some of the most important information I can possibly share with anybody else. So value is the idea of the light and the dark of something. So when you look at a photograph in black and white, this is the value. Value communicates an awful lot, right? Look at Ansel Adams' work. We love it. It conveys mood. We get great composition design. This value is really the foundation of composition, how these value structures play with each other. It's more complex than that, but today is not about composition. And also value, how you use value is largely what drives individual style, which I'll talk about a little bit more. So when we're looking at value, what really makes it tough is there's so much emphasis in our lives put on color, and it's really hard to see past color and see the value that's happening. Every color, if you look at my palette, every color has a value. Some of these are dark, some are light. If we took a photo and made it black and white, you would see that easily. If you squint at your screen, you can see that this area of my palette is lighter, and then towards the edges gets darker. Well, it's lighter down here. Every color has value, which you can see when you make a photograph in black and white, right? But when we're mixing color in paint, or when we're choosing colors in pastel or colored pencil or any other medium, we're making choices about more than color. We're also making choices about value. And it's really tough to keep both of these in mind, partly because value has not been emphasized in our lives. When we're little kids, we're taught how to sort things by color, right? The color and shape sorting toys. Nobody teaches us how to sort by value. Nobody is teaching us, oh, look at that ball. That's a, 20% gray, and that one's a 40% gray. Imagine what we would be as artists if we had that kind of learning from early youth and we were just paying attention to our world that way. I think it'd be phenomenal.
Absolutely.
But as adults, it's harder to learn new stuff, right? And even, kids can learn this stuff if you work with them, but as adults, it's a little bit more challenging. So I've got some, I don't like the word tricks because they're not tricks, but some ways to conceive of what it is that you're trying to do. So as we're talking about value, there's also lots of different layers. So when we're looking at value, well, let me back up a second. I kind of break this down into sort of 4 concepts. So there's your perception. We all have a subconscious sense of what looks right, which is a lot harder to see in your own work because you're too attached to it. But if you look at something somebody else did, we've all seen paintings that look kind of wrong. And you can't always identify why. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not so obvious. We all have this internal visual encyclopedia that's subconscious. We've observed the world. We know how things are supposed to look, but we can't necessarily articulate that on recall. It's just this subconscious sense. Also, perception is our unique way of conceiving what it is that we're looking at, which is based on our unique lived experiences, our emotional attachments to a subject, all sorts of things. Then there's observation, which is learning to see value accurately, so much as we're capable of, because again, perception affects how we observe. And then representation. How do we paint our observations accurately, meaning copying, objectively comparing one thing to another thing and making them match each other. And then interpretation is learning to manipulate to suit our personal taste and style. So we might observe something one way and make a choice to change it. And my preference for students is always that any changes we make from our subject that we've chosen as a reference, whether it's live and plein air, whether it's a photo reference, is that the changes you make are conscious and chosen, not accidents or things that happen without realizing they were happening. And that's a lifelong journey. I don't know that any of us ever actually get there, but it's an interesting pursuit to learn about yourself, how you see things differently when you're, not as tuned in. And some of that leads to our personal style too. So that's not bad. They're just things I like to call out as what's going on as we're examining this process. So, as we're getting into this idea, there are several different layers. That's maybe not the right way to put it. I don't know what the right word is. But as we're looking at value, there's a few different ways of thinking about value. So this image is from my reference photograph. I just made it black and white. And so we're seeing, something approaching an infinite number of values, these teeny tiny transitions between very subtle shifts in value. The camera lens can perceive that. Our eyes probably perceive way more nuance. But when we think about trying to make this as a painting, that's overwhelming, right? Like none of us, I don't think it's within human capacity to actually have the patience to accurately copy every single nuance exactly as it is. And I think that's a good thing. That's what makes artists unique. That's what makes each of us paint something that looks different, because we each are perceiving and observing and translating the things that we see in different ways. So how do you figure that out? How do you figure out how you're going to do this? A few things I want to explain or show first are kind of manipulating what's happening in values. So you've maybe heard the idea of your value structure or large value masses as driving a compositional design. So I have a few different versions. I took the same image, and you can do this yourself. If you have a camera with a phone on it, you probably have a photo editing software that came on that where you can adjust a few basic things. So if you take a photograph on your phone and you go into your editing tool, you can make it black and white, and then you'll get something like this. You probably have a tool in there called contrast. And if you play with that, there's usually a little toggle that you can kind of push along this spectrum, along this line, and it'll go more contrast and less contrast. And if you go all the way less, you just get gray. Everything is gray. And if you go all the way to high contrast, you get just black and white. So this top image here is how my editing tool perceived this when we get rid of all the nuances of value and made everything black and white. If you can see that, there's a lot of tiny little shapes. But as I pull it away, and if you squint at your screen, those black and whites next to each other in some areas give a sense of gray. So this is only black and white, but we still have a perception of gray because of these tiny shapes side by side. And this is what's happening in the whole world all around us all the time. If you look around the room that you're in, every single thing is just an abstract shape. It's that certain organizations of abstract shapes we have labels for. So like one set of shapes is a chair, another set of shapes is a cat. But when we're painting, we're looking at, it's very helpful to see things as just abstract shapes and let go of the sense of things as subject matter. So forget that it's rock and trees or whatever. They're just shapes. And if you can get the right shape in the right place and get the value pretty close, it's going to look just like the subject you're looking at.
Are you going to show us how to do that today?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with value first.
All right.
So if we made it just black and white, we have a structure kind of like this. And if you were to try to paint this or give it, let me back up. We're going to do that in a sec. If you're really struggling seeing value, here's one of the best tools I think you can do. Print a copy of your reference. And here I've got, this was the photograph as is. This was all the way black and white. And then I have a couple kind of in between where I push that contrast and I'm exaggerating differently. And I just did that to explain that that's something I would highly recommend doing. If you have a photo editing tool, play with images in black and white and get a sense of what those structures are and how your brain is reading what you see with black and white. If I told you to do a 2-value study, just black and white, and I'm giving you a grayscale image like this, you're having to choose any value shape I look at. Is it closer to black or is it closer to white? And if that's really a struggle to see, do some experimenting and play with this a little bit. You can take a Sharpie and pick, if I'm going to say everything that's black, I'm going to outline with a Sharpie. You can squint. That can make it a lot easier. You can make it small. But if I go around and have to choose, so some areas I've got to pick, is this closer to black or white? And you might choose differently on different days. And that's okay. I might say this whole, if I had to make it just black and white, I would probably give all of this black. And then if you happen to have pastels or charcoal or chalk or anything like that around, you could even draw right on top of this and simplify. So I just have some pastel here. And this is without having to draw it on your own. This is just practice for seeing what these shapes are, this main structure here. And this is black. And then everything else. Okay, well, my white's not covering really great, but you get the idea. Everything else here would be my white shapes. Again, we're not digging into composition here, but if we were, what's happening there, and I did a really rough sketch here, this is our main value structure in this image. And so if you do an example like this, and you've probably seen other artists show you how to do this, doing value studies and working out where those main darks and lights are, what helps with this is this underlying structure is really what drives the mood and emotion of the piece. If you have something that you really, really like the way it looks, and you change this structure, you're probably going to feel like it seems wrong when you finish the painting, and it might be really tough to figure out what seems wrong about it. It usually comes back to value in this structure changing. There's some tricks I'll explain, I'll show later for being able to see when your painting is matching or not matching, but keeping track of this, taking 2 minutes to figure this out before you do a painting, knowing what that structure needs to be and being able to refer back to that as you paint is really helpful. And this structure, what we basically have is kind of an arrowish shape over here, right? a narrow arrow over here, a kind of lumpy shape here, and a lumpy shape here. This is our main compositional structure that we've got going on, coming from a complex grayscale. You can see, let me make some more room here. If you squint, yeah, it's not the exact same because we're missing grayscale. And I could have changed my mind. Maybe I could have made all of this black and kept all of this white. There, you know, there's some arbitrary human choice to make in the mix of these things. This is that main structure. This is what's going to drive the mood and emotion. I had a student once, we were talking about this and explaining, and she gave me an example at the end of the session of a painting she really was unhappy with. And she showed me the painting. It was a nice painting. And then she showed me her reference and she told me she was so unhappy. And the reference was this line of mountains behind a lake. And she was standing across from these mountains in this very shaded, she was under the trees, and it was dark and deeply shaded in the foreground. And then this brilliant light on these mountains across the water. And she had decided to lighten the shadows, because maybe the shadows in the trees were a little too dark. And so she lightened that whole foreground area. And then she was so unhappy because it didn't feel the same. So, well, you completely changed your value structure. We had just discussed all of this, and she still wasn't able to see that in her own work because this is so hard to see and recognize. So what I want to try to do is translate that for you. And, 40 minutes or an hour here together is not really enough time to help you master it, but I'm hoping to give you the foundation that you
doing great.
Work and
People are
practice.
Enthralled.
And this would be a great spot, Eric, if you've got something to share.
Okay, that would be a good spot. All right, Jessica, thank you so much for this. Jessica, I should mention, is going to be on Watercolor Live. If you don't know about Watercolor Live, you do not want to miss it. It is a worldwide online art training event, a conference, if you will. And unlike conferences that are boring, that have boring speakers, this is like all demos all the time. It's great. We got about 22 artists teaching over 4 days. And Jessica is going to teach her watercolor techniques. And let's pull up her watercolors again, just so you guys, in case you came in late, didn't see them. Just look at that. And if you want to learn how to do that, I mean, it would be worth the price of Watercolor Live alone, just to learn how Jessica does that. She'll be teaching on Watercolor Live along with 22 other artists. And that's coming up in January, the 21st through 23rd. And I was explaining yesterday, I'll explain this again. We're going to have to cut off registration soon because we have to buy packages of streaming in bundles. And so, we have several thousand people who are attending. And once if we have to buy a bundle for a few more thousand, it's very expensive. So we have to cut it off at some point. So anyway, we're getting close. So just make sure you get registered to Watercolor Live. We have more people than ever. This is the largest online conference in the world, and you want to be part of it. We have it every year, but you don't want to wait because the instructors are never the same. You want to come to this year's. And by the way, there are replays. So if you cannot make the date, you can come to the replays. Okay, now we're going to go back to Jessica. Jessica, let's do this.
All right. So when you're trying to translate this into your own work, as we're painting, we're mixing paints that have value and bringing it to the paper and making our shapes. Or if you're drawing, you're doing that with your drawing medium. Let's think about this in a few different stages. So we talked through the 2 value, just black and white. What if I gave you a 3rd value? If I said you have black, white, and gray, what can you see and identify? How can you look at your reference and think about what's the darkest, what's the lightest, what's in the middle? And so this is just a great tool for learning how to see value more accurately, both live. If you're a plein air painter, it can feel so hard to see and recognize value accurately. And with a photograph as well, even if you have that sitting in front of you in this black and white, which, by the way, if you're a plein air painter, you can use your camera, take a photograph, shift it to black and white, and compare the two. So look in person to get your color, to get a sense of value, and then verify the value that you think you're seeing off of your camera. It's a tool. Eric will maybe also show you these really cool value specs that they have that also can help you in person, whether you're looking at a reference photograph or a live landscape. to see those values a little bit more accurately. So just as practice, if I gave you 3 values, I would say, let's start with the darkest. If I said outline every shape that's your darkest dark, I bet all of you could do this, right? You could pick everything that looks black and outline that shape, right? This is not so hard if we just break it down into something a little bit simpler, right? And let's say if we're doing 3 values, let's call black our 3. So we can make this into a little paint by number. Here's our 3s. And honestly, if you only have 3 values, how are we going to handle this shape? There's a whole lot happening in there, right? A lot of information, a lot of detail. It can feel overwhelming, but you only have 3 choices: black, white, or gray. Is that closer to gray right in the middle, or is it closer to black? And whatever medium you work in, you can make yourself a little value chart to help you recognize these things. It's a great way to get practice going from, in watercolor, we're starting with paper white. If you're in oil or acrylic, you're probably going to use your white paint. And then the darkest you can get. And you want to use a very dark value for this. This happens to be neutral tint, but it doesn't matter. Look at your palette, pick what looks the darkest, or mix a couple of the darkest, and it'll probably get you even darker yet. And just get as inky dark as you can get, and then practice, how do I get an even division? It's arbitrary. I chose 9 values, so I have 3 darkest, 3 middle, and 3 lightest values, but it doesn't matter, right? You could do 6 values, you could be in 20 values. All of them are worth practicing. But from here, if you're going to do a 3-value study, I would say make one of these with just white, black, and a really in the middle gray. So an in the middle gray is going to be in here. So if I have to look at this shape and say, is it closer to gray or closer to black? That's a choice to make. I'm going to say, I think it looks closer to black. So I would probably call this whole shape a number 3. And then I've got this shape is a 3, and lightest lights are going to be a 1. The sky, again, how easy is it to look at this and think, oh, there's like 10 different values just in that cloud shape, and I want to find all those values. We're going to back up. If we have to simplify and choose light, dark, or medium, what's happening in that shape? I would argue that if this is our mid value, that whole sky is a 1 value. That whole sky is going to be white. And in our water, we might have black here, and maybe we choose gray here. And then I think these shapes are our grays. Those are pretty close, closer to gray than white or black. And there's a 3-value paint by number. Now, what if I gave you 5 values? You get the idea here? If I gave you 5, you could, again, make yourself a value chart with your darkest dark. Well, that's not 5. Ignore that. If you're in pencil, your darkest dark is not going to be as dark as some other mediums can be, right? And depending on what you're working,
the Sharpie would be dark.
Right, the Sharpie would be. But if the medium I'm working with is different, think about that too, because that's going to be an effect. So if that's my darkest dark and I'm only going to do 5, maybe I'm in here as my 4, and here is my 3. Yeah, that's probably should get darker, huh? Yeah, that's my 3. This is my 3. This is my 2. And there's my 1. Something like that. If you make yourself a chart, those are your choices. What shapes do you see, if we're simplifying, that match each of those? And the point of doing that is not that you're going to paint that way, but you're training your brain to see these shapes a little more simplified and see the rough value and how these structures come together. And you can do this for yourself in anything you want. You could do it 3 values, 5 values, 9 values, anything. Now, what gets really interesting is when we go to translate this into a color painting, right? Because now you're doing color and value, and it can be really tough to tell the difference between those. I feel like I just skipped something. Double check my notes. I get carried away when I'm teaching. There's so much information to share, and there's never enough time to share it all.
Never.
Never. Oh, so when we're looking at these images, if you're standing outside, if I was down at the lake, this is 5 blocks from my house, this spot. I love it. I paint it all the time. If I'm looking at this in person, there are so many values happening. Where do you even begin to start, right? How do you choose what to do? This is where I would say do a study or two. If you're a plein air painter as well, it is worth the 2 minutes you might spend just to work out a rough sense of what you're seeing, so you have a framework to conceive the rest of your painting from. So I'm just going to demonstrate this in watercolor, but of course you can use any medium that you like. This information applies to every painting and drawing medium. Again, I'm just going with some neutral tint here. Let's do a 3-value practice here. So I'm going to do very inky dark. I'm just going to make myself 3 puddles, because here's one of the challenges with watercolor is as I add water, I'm changing the value, right? So every time I come into water, I'm changing my value. It's really easy to get those nice, like soft edges and blended values.
So if you were doing this with oil paint, you'd be adding white.
Right. Right. And I would still, make 3 puddles. The benefit with oil or acrylic for a study like this is that what your paint looks like is what it's going to be on the paper. In watercolor, these will blend with each other and we'll get nice value transitions that are not just a straight 3-value study unless you're careful with it. So I'm going to start with my middle value. If this is a 3-value study, I'm going to say, here's my gray. And I'm not trying to make this pretty. The point is not to make something beautiful in this case. It might happen, but that's not the goal. The goal is to get your brain thinking about what it's seeing and processing. I might change my mind here on a couple things. That's going to be a 2. That's going to be a 2. So there's my grays. And then if I want to go into my blacks, again, does not have to be pretty. I did pre-draw this out to save time, because I wanted to make sure we could talk about what I really wanted to. Now, ideally, my paint would be dry before I do this. I am going to get a little bit of shifting here, but I'm not working super wet, so this is not as fluid as it could be. Hopefully that will help it not make as big of a mess as I could end up with. And I'm not trying to get all the small shapes that I can see. I'm trying to stick with my main large shapes. And this was all I decided that was going to be black. So not beautiful. But if you squint, do you see how these look very similar? They're not exactly the same because I'm not showing you all of the values. And yeah, I have a tendency, you've seen my work. My tendency is to want to fix this because it doesn't look right. It doesn't have all the detail. It doesn't have all of the things. But none of that matters. The detail is not what makes a painting amazing. The detail, the color, they're wonderful, and they're rewards for looking up. Well, detail is a wonderful reward for looking up close at a piece, but if it doesn't stand up from across a room or across a gallery space, it's not working. This is the foundation of what's going to make a piece read like the subject from a long ways away. Anything I do with detail is, that's great, but only when you're up close. If you want to compel somebody to come close to your painting, this is where it's at. And I will comment, though, in any medium, as we come into detail. So if we look at this, there's all these, especially rocks. Rocks have all these teeny tiny little value shapes and value transitions. If you start with this and then you start to add those in, each one of those little shapes is a dark value. And just like if you're familiar with stippling or pointillism, which I should have had an example of, we could do little dots. Actually, this is better with a Sharpie. If I do dots, I should have not gone this big. I can represent value with dots. I don't have to do shading. When I have more dots closer together, it looks darker. When dots are further away from each other, they look lighter. I can give you the sense of a rendered sphere, if we take the time and patience to do it, by just putting dots. This is what's happening when you add texture to something like a rock. You're putting all these tiny little dots of shape. You are increasing the value. You're also making that shape darker. So it's important to think about as you're painting, those little tiny shapes are going to be affecting the overall value of something. And that's why I like to start here is what is my end goal in this shape here? My end goal is roughly this value. Okay, so as I'm building texture, I need to make sure that I'm paying attention as I build that texture that I'm not getting a whole lot darker than I intended to get.
I had my portrait done by the Wall Street Journal, and the whole portrait is done in little dots.
Yeah. Well, and that's how newspapers printed for forever. I don't know if they still do, but the technology has probably changed by now. But yeah, there's so many different ways to represent value. So many different ways. People are creative. Like as a species, humans are creative problem solvers. We can figure out how to do just about anything if we can articulate for ourselves what it is we're even trying to do in the first place. So to me, being able to see what this value structure is the most important thing. If you can see it accurately and choose how you want to represent it, you'll figure out a way to get there. You'll come up with techniques and texture, whatever it is that you're wanting to do, you'll figure out a way. We reinvent the same things over and over again. You don't need somebody to show you all the techniques. It's these main understandings of things. So again, 5 value, I want to make sure we don't run out of time here. We've got 5 value. I could do the same thing. If I allow myself 5 values, I've got my lightest light, a white, then I'm gonna have a light gray, a medium gray, a dark gray, and black. So I'm gonna do my light gray first, just cause. So looking back at this same reference, now I might make some different choices here. I know what this is in 2 values. I know what this feels like in 3 values. Where would I choose what's between a 1 and a 3? What do I wish I could represent? And I'm gonna say, for me, these cloud shapes are a big piece of it. And then a little bit in the sky. And if I'm wanting to do this, if I'm practicing this just for understanding, seeing 5 values, I'm not going to blend my values into each other to make it beautiful. I'm going to keep them chunky and blocky and as 5 distinct values. You could do this with pastels, pick 5 values. You could get markers in 5 values. You could have your paint prepped out in 5 values. It doesn't matter. You don't have to use the same medium you like to paint in or draw in to do these. It really doesn't matter. It's just you're practicing seeing the thing and representing the thing. So let's see if I also have, I'm going to say that this is probably also my 2 value, maybe a touch over there. And I think, I might give this one a 2. Then I think I'm on to my 3 and I still have my puddle. It's probably dried a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit of water. So I'm back to now, where's my middle value? And I think I'm still going to see this as middle value. I feel like this is a little bit darker. Oops, and it's blending. Imagine it's not blending. It doesn't matter what the outcome looks like. Again, we're not trying to make a beautiful painting. It's the process of this that is going to help us out. And I think that's really tough for us in our culture. So much of what the rewards and the commentary is for us as a society is outcome driven. And there's a lot to be said for process. Now I want to find a dark gray that's not quite black, but is darker than my 3 value. And let's see, darkest darks are definitely these shadow shapes. I would say an awful lot of this is going to be, that's a little too dark. Awful lot of this is going to be my dark gray. Again, not trying to make it beautiful. I'm getting into, I want to put detail. I'm using a wide flat brush to help keep me from getting into the detail. I can certainly paint detail like crazy with this brush when I want to, but it's easier for me to pull out than if I was working with a round brush, which just helps me because I am really drawn to all the nuances of things happening in a painting. I love that stuff. I would also say this distant mountain is going to be a dark gray and not black. And I'm not seeing enough transition between my number 3 and 4 values, my gray and dark gray. So I'm going to go back over this. Not ideal, but this is what happens, right? Happens to all of us. So those are my 4s. And then I've got my darkest darks, my blacks. And there's a little bit in there. I know this is going to blend. Maybe I'll do some of the other shapes first. This is a darkest. Darkest, and that should not be white. That should have been a 4, a dark gray, but I missed it. I'm trying to work fast here, not just because we're doing a demo, but because I think it's really helpful to work faster and see what you see when you're working faster. It's really educational about yourself to see how you're recognizing things when you're moving at speed. It's also helpful to slow down and see what you're capable of when you really give something your full attention. I'm going to go back to the dark gray for a couple of shapes here. I missed the water. I wanted that to be a dark gray. And that shape in the rock here. Okay. It's not perfect. It's not ideal, but it's starting to have a little more similarity to this than that one does. Oh no, now I look at it on the screen, I can see all sorts of things I wish I'd handled differently. Doesn't matter. This is exercise. This is practicing seeing and getting a sense of what's happening in your subject, in your reference, and what's happening on your paper. And then if I did come into this as a more finished painting, let's say we were going to do this in just black and white still. Now, if I gave you all the values in watercolor, that means I'm really happy because I can blend with water. I can get softer edges. Remember, softer edges and those kinds of things happening, those are value transitions. And so if you're working in watercolor and you're softening edges, remember that you're creating a value transition. And if you're doing it blindly, that transition might not match what you're trying to match in your subject as close as you're wanting to match it. It does not have to be exact. Our goal is not to exactly copy something we see. It's to craft an interpretation that suits who we are and what we're interested in, what we care about, what's happening in the painting. You're not supposed to have to do anything the way anybody else does it. Permission granted. You get to do whatever you want to do that makes you happy the way it makes you happy. Just because other people talk about things certain ways does not mean that's what your goals have to be. Really, really tough to do that sometimes. But things like this sky shape, if I'm doing this as a gradient, as a dark to light, I'm going to look at where does that value start to shift? Is it a smooth transition through this whole space? Does it stay darker and then dramatically get lighter? Is it a very even transition? Does it stay dark for a long ways and then get lighter very quickly? Matching that can be really helpful. And that comes back into identifying what's going on in the values. And I think doing sketches like this before you do a painting is a great way to conceive of what you're looking at. So that when you go to paint it, you've already practiced these shapes. You know what they are. You know kind of the feel of them. You've practiced what you're seeing with the values several times over, and you had a chance to identify things that you don't like in those practices so that when you're putting it into your final painting, you have a better chance of catching things that are going to make you displeased with your final outcome. And you're practicing your medium in a less outcome-driven experience. And so maybe you're more willing to experiment with some things or push out of your comfort zone. I am somebody who, look at my work. I sure love the details. I sure love getting into all the stuff that's going on. But I work really hard to make sure that I don't become somebody who is way too detail driven and loses sight of the important big picture. I look in every painting for ways to leave things very abstract and just give the impression that I'm giving all of the detail, because to me, that's more how we perceive the world anyways. And I find that really interesting, how we identify the things that how we think of the things that we've looked at. So if I go out on one of the local rivers that I love to paint here, and I sit and look at that river, I might feel like I've looked at every single thing in detail. And the reality is I've probably looked at very little of it. A few things, you focus on one thing for a while, take it in. You move to something else for a while, take it in. The sense is that you've looked at all of it, that you felt all of the detail. So you go to paint and you feel like you've seen, all of the things going on. And so you paint every last detail and your painting feels artificial. Well, what on earth happened? I painted it exactly like I see it. Why doesn't it feel right? Well, because you didn't actually see it that way. You didn't perceive every last detail. There's areas where your brain just inferred what was going on based on information around that you looked at. So realistically, we look at an area for a while, we move and look at another area for a while, we move and look at another area for a while, and then we just assume stuff about everything in between. I like to find areas to do that in a painting because to me, it more accurately represents the experience of being in a place. I like to play with that. I like to, in my work, I'm highly motivated by just a sense of curiosity and discovery of what's going on that makes this place feel like it does to me this particular day, this particular weather, this particular light, all of those things. So back to the painting I'm working on. I only have a couple values going here so far, and it's really easy. Speaking a little bit specific to watercolor because it's my medium of choice, so why not? This will apply to other mediums too. It's so easy to stick in a narrow range of value out of a sense of safety. In watercolor, it can feel scary to go darker, but how do we perceive the world? We have these rich darks in most places, not always, but most places, most things, most subjects are going to have some very rich darks. And
so
if you're
do you
missing
typically go through this process? If you're doing a plein air, do you go through this on location?
I am terrible. My dad went to school for art. My mom went to school for music. My mom was my piano teacher. That's what she did professionally. And I was the student that like never wanted to practice any of the instruments I played until I hit bagpipes. That's a whole nother story. I practiced that like there was no tomorrow. I hated practicing, loved the instruments, loved playing music, hated the scales, hated the things. I have done a lot of what I've done in my painting career the hard way. I figured it out in paintings instead of doing these kinds of things. And it's been through teaching others and trying to help other people shortcut some of that I've come to these things. When I have a painting that really matters and I feel uncertain about, I absolutely will come into these kinds of exercises to practice stuff. Other times, I'm just a little obstinate and I just do the thing anyways. And if that's you, don't feel bad. You don't have to be somebody that loves and does the exercises. It's okay to do it the hard way. But then watch people like me who will give you some examples of what you would do if you're going to do the exercises, and envision this when you're in places. Take the time to really look. Maybe just use your camera as a sketching medium. You know, you could take a photograph, whether plein air, or you're going to take that photo home and paint it. Taking the time with the photograph can be like sketching. If you really are looking at it and paying attention to what's happening in the value structures, play with the contrast, play with, if you're really into Photoshop and such things, play with the levels and see what happens and how it affects the mood and the feel of the photograph to start changing things.
If you guys hang in there, when Jessica's done, I'm going to show you my first value painting ever.
Awesome.
And I'm going to tell you about something that I do that is good for values.
And so let's be really critical at this. I'm talking while painting, which is great because I always make lots of mistakes and then I can explain what I did wrong. I'm okay here for value, but look at how much I'm off through here. I've been timid and I've been doing this very gradually, afraid that while talking, I'm going to go too far too fast. And I went nowhere near far enough. And this stuff happens to us. It's okay. Take time and analyze what you're doing. And I want to show you a really great tool for that before too far. So I might actually pause here. Actually, I'm going to do this really fast. I'm changing my mind. How much time do we have? Got maybe 10 minutes.
You're okay.
Okay. So I'm going to, I didn't think I would have time, but I've been doing pretty good here. Let's say that I'm going to do this in color and I'm going to try really fast to hit this. I'm not going to worry about exact color. And I'll be honest, if you're working from photographs, the color is the camera's perception, your printer's perception, and the way they print on the particular paper you're using. This is not something that's, a gold standard that you need to follow. Far better to pay attention if you really care about accurate color representation. Pay attention when you're seeing the subject in life, whether it's landscape, portrait, still life, any of it. Pay attention when you're there in person. You can take some color notes in a sketchbook and just mix the color and value that you see and take that back to your studio if you're a studio painter. But do not take anything from a photo unless your point is practice. It is absolutely worth trying to exactly match color in a photo if what your goal is is to work on your color representation, your ability to accurately match color, then absolutely, that's a great tool.
Sparky is asking, what questions do you ask yourself when it's time to switch to color to match your value study?
Oh, that's a great question. Questions I ask myself. I'm not sure that I ask myself questions, but I do try to really pay attention when I'm mixing my paint that I'm thinking value as well as color. And that at this point, it's pretty second nature. I don't actually always have to consciously think about it, but I'll catch myself having done things once I put paint to paper, having done things that were not actually following what I was seeing because I was distracted by something else. So I do try to pay attention when I'm planning a painting to where are the potential distractions so that I can hopefully catch those.
So when you do a painting like the ones we showed at the top of the show,
Yeah.
I'll bring that up real quick again. Do you go ahead and sketch in like you've done here? Do you sketch in the whole thing?
I do draw them. So I am somebody who is a terrible overanalyzer and overly self-critical and overly self-doubtful. And I have, you name an existential crisis about painting and I've had it at least once. And I'm much further along now, but I went through an awful lot of issues on the way to where I am at this point in my career. And some of it was really thinking that I had no skill in any number of things. So I did spend a lot of time, how do I say this? Double checking everything that I did, thinking that it was wrong, thinking, well, anyways, what I've learned long-term is the planning process is really key. And that's probably especially true for watercolor for obvious reasons. But I'm sorry. I'm trying to think color and painting and answering a question altogether is not the easiest. I will spend more time. I've learned the things that I need to pay attention to before I even start painting so that my painting will go the way I intend it to. And I've learned how much more the value matters than color. I mean, truly, people say that all the time. And it doesn't necessarily seem true because we're so tied into color, but the things that we label color, half the time or more, it's a value issue, not really a color issue. Did I miss the question?
No, you did it. You did a great job.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm going to kind of purposefully this is things I see students do all the time. We get into stuff like this and it's like, oh, greens are hard. How do I get those greens right? How do I make sure that color is right? What is happening there? And I'll show you in just a second why that's not necessarily the best first thing to think about. So I can look at this and feel really disappointed that this is not the color I wanted it to be. Let's just get the darks in here. This is not an example of what to do. I'm doing this with some errors so I can show you how you can check what you're doing and self-correct along the way. Because I'll tell you what, when you're the one making something, I'm sure you've all run into this. You're the one making it is an awful lot harder to feel like you're seeing what you're actually doing. Other people will look at your painting and say, oh, that's so great. And you're thinking, oh, it's so awful. Everything about it is wrong. What on earth are they saying? They're just trying to be nice to me. That's not really what's happening. That's probably not the case. They probably are seeing things that you're not able to see because you're too close to it. When we're the one who creates something, we see the entire process. Every single stroke we made, everything that happened, all the things that felt unattractive or like we were handling them in the wrong way, all of that stuff. And it's really tough to separate from that. So here's one tool for learning to separate from that. So I've got my little color painting I did. There's my color photograph. I'm going to take out my phone here and I'm going to take a photo of the two of those together. And from there, I'm going to put it into there we go.
Oh, now we all know your password.
Yeah, well, half of it recognized my face finally. Okay, so I'm going to put it in my photo editor. And I'm just going to take away the saturation so it's now black and white. So there I am, black and white. The colors, it's a little purple, but whatever. Now we can look at this and say, where am I accurate? Where am I not? If my goal is to match this accurately, keep in mind that does not need to be your goal, and it often is not going to be your goal. This is a photograph. It's different from what it feels like in real life. You're going to make some interpretations, but if you want those interpretations to be by choice, this is a great tool to see, oh my goodness, this whole shape, look at how light I am. Yeah. I was so focused on trying to get a green color. And this is what I hear students say all the time as I'm working on my greens, they show me their painting. It just doesn't feel right. And usually it's just because the value is not there. The green's close enough. It doesn't matter. But this helps show you or helps you see where it's off. I got way too dark in this shape, but maybe I'll decide I love that. Maybe I want it that dark. Maybe that will end up helping in some way with something else. But I could also come back in and lighten it. Yeah, it's watercolor, but you know, watercolor is a lot more flexible than it gets credit for. We could wet an area and dab it out and lighten that a little bit if we need to. I am a fan. As somebody who did not like the exercises, I learned everything in the paintings. I never gave up on a painting. I would work things to death to try to get it to turn into a good painting. And I can give you so many examples of things that felt like a disaster to me and weren't. And maybe one of the best examples, the second painting that I got in the American Watercolor Society. I had practiced this painting. I'd painted the subject twice before. I knew what I was going to do. I gave myself all the time in the world, spent 98 hours. Yes, I actually tracked it. I was working on this whole thing. I had painted this before. I had practiced this before. And this one rock shape turned out just awful. I didn't like it. It didn't feel like it fit the rest of the painting. It just felt wrong. So I fixed it. Still felt wrong. Fixed it. Still felt wrong. I did, I think, 26 layers on that one rock trying to fix it. And I was scrubbing back down to paper. I was using the magic eraser thing to try to scrub back down. It was so overworked. There's multiple layers of opaque trying to cover it up. I would practice it, knowing for sure I knew what I wanted to do. So it'd be one clean application, and it still didn't go right. And in the end, I got it what felt acceptable to me. It may have been fine to start with. I just didn't like it. But I finally got it to where I felt it was acceptable. And then I'm looking at my painting and realizing, well, these other rocks are fresh and lovely. And then this one looks overworked. Well, I had to go back over the fresh and lovely rocks, and I made several of them look overworked so that it matched. So this one no longer felt weird. It was just part of the rest of the painting, as part of the look. Not the look I wanted or that I was after initially, but it wasn't a bad look. It looked great. People loved the painting. It sold. It was fantastic. But I can look at that painting and feel like it was a failure, right? And I think that's something a lot of us struggle with, is being stuck in that process. If you look at things on a phone camera, if you put your painting across the room in a room you don't use all the time, and it'll surprise you. You turn on the lights. Oh yeah, there's that painting. Try to look at things that way, or even turn it upside down and just look at the abstract shapes going on, and just look at, oh, this is an interesting mix of shapes, the way these balance with each other, or I like the value structure that I got in that, or I like the colors I got in that. Look for things you can, be nice to yourself.
Well, Jessica, this has been wonderful. Why don't you come back on camera so we can all see you?
Absolutely. People
who weren't here in the beginning. Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was great.
So welcome.
As a matter of fact, we're gonna make sure that the people who are on Watercolor Live and the Beginners Day, the Essentials Day, we're gonna put this in as bonus content because it's
super.
So good.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We've put all your website and all of your contact information in the chat.
Thanks.
And you guys need to follow up and watch her career, follow her on Instagram.
Thanks.
And then make sure you see her painting demonstration at Art School Live, at Watercolor Live. Too many lives. Anyway, thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome. If I can add one more tip, this scene that I painted back during COVID, I did a little 1.5 hour paint along with this scene. I did it with kids like Crayola brand paints on office paper because I had a lot of young students who were stuck at home and that's all they had for materials. But there's a free paint along on my website if you would like to play this through in color and see how I would handle this in color after watching this. You can go over there and finish this process and go through from your value studies into color.
Okay. Something happened. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, you glitched out for a second there. Okay, well, we'll put your website in there.
Did you catch that? Okay.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're so welcome. Have a good day, everyone.
All right. Jessica mentioned value specs. These are great Christmas gifts, and they're bright red First off, because the lenses are red, it's a special red to help you get the values right. It took us months to get this right, but they're bright red, so you can find them in your dark bag. And I always use them, and that way I can check my values all the time, put them on my head, bring them down, bring them up, bring them down. That's one thing. The second thing I wanted to do is when I learned to paint, seriously, my instructor said, you need to do a value study once a year. And even for the rest of your life, no matter how good you are, do a whole painting. The first painting I ever did was this one right here. And this is a Mapplethorpe photograph that I painted. And it's a value study. Now, I put a slight tone of yellow over the whole painting to give it an aged look. But this was the very first painting I ever did. And this took me months because I was just learning. And this is an oil painting. But that's just to show you that you can get some really great stuff out of values. Now, the other thing I just want to mention is that I have a program called Paint by Note. And the idea is that values are much like music notes in that if you learn the scale, the seven notes on a piano, you can learn to play any song. The same thing is if you learn the values, basically 7 to 10 values, you can paint any painting. And so this is a program. If you go to paintbynote.com, you can get actually 3 free lessons on values, painting and values, and we do it with different colors and values. And you can get that. There's some stuff there you can buy too if you want to, but the idea is to get the free lessons, just go to paintbynote.com. Thank you again to Jessica. You are a rock star. We have a free gift for everybody today. Anybody who wants this free gift, it's called Watercolor Mastery. It's an ebook. Just go to AmericanWatercolor.net. That's our newsletter. /ebook, AmericanWatercolor.net /ebook. Remember, subscribe to this program on YouTube and hit the little notification bell so that you get notified when we go live. If you liked it, give us a review and say something and a comment or a like. That would be great. And that helps YouTube know that they should push us out to other people. Thank you guys for watching, and especially thank you to Jessica Bryant. She's a rock star. You want to watch her. She's going to be soaring. She's in the Prix de West. That's the best of the best. And so you get in there, your career is going to soar, and she's in there. So watch what she does because she's an amazing artist. And I was blown away by her work in person at the Plein Air convention in her booth there. And so now she's on Watercolor Live and she's in Prix de West, and the world is her oyster. So congrats, Jessica. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be here tomorrow, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.